Sziasztok mindenkinek! Hello everyone, my name is Christine, and I am the host here at the Hungarian Heritage Podcast, the show where we connect your modern life to your Hungarian heritage. We will build bridges between Hungarians who live in Hungary to those with Hungarian heritage who live in all other parts of the world. Not to mention the bridges that we will build between the generations. This podcast is a place where everyone is welcome, where you don't even need to be Hungarian or speak Hungarian to join in on the fun. We will talk about all the things that we love about Hungary, the Hungarian people, and the Hungarian culture, as well as the cool things Hungarian people are doing around the world. We will discover new things, review things you may already know, and we will have a lot of fun along the way. So, if you're looking to make that first connection to your Hungarian heritage, or you're looking to dig a little deeper, then you're in the right place. Join me as we grow this community and continue to connect the circles of Hungarians around us. On this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast, I will be talking with Ilka Kocsis, and she is the author of Ilka's Kitchen, a Hungarian cookbook, but not the usual type of cookbook that you would encounter on a bookshelf. Ilka's Kitchen is also a memoir, with her personal memories and family stories woven in between the recipes. It is a cookbook that is masterfully created to honor her Hungarian heritage through her family's journey to Australia, her personal memories of her Hungarian heritage and experiences, and of course, her love of cooking Hungarian food. By the end of this episode, I am sure you will be craving Hungarian food. But that's not all. We also have a surprise announcement for our listeners, so make sure you stay tuned until the end. Please join me in welcoming Ilka Kocsis from Perth, Australia. And she is here to talk about her book, Ilka's Kitchen, Stories and Recipes from Her Hungarian Heritage. Welcome, Ilka. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Christine, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Same, the feeling is mutual. So, as per usual, if you've been listening, before we talk about the main event of the podcast, we always talk about Hungarian heritage. So, let's talk about your Hungarian heritage and your family's arrival in Australia. Tell us all about that.
Okay, my parents were refugees from the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. My mum was 15 when she escaped with her older sister, and my dad was 18 and escaped with a bunch of his friends. They both ended up in the Netherlands, and they didn't know each other when they left Hungary, but eventually they met up at, I think it was a table tennis tournament, I believe, for Hungarians in Amsterdam. And they met, fell in love, got married, and decided that Holland was not the place for them, and they were looking at where to go. Mother spoke very good English. My dad was quite broken, and they really struggled to adapt to the Australian way of life, which was pretty much common in that era of the 60s. I was born soon after. Not only had they migrated, they all of a sudden had a baby. And so for the first 7 years of my life, there was virtually no talk about Hungary. They didn't even speak Hungarian in the house. I only knew a few words like Yoiszakat, good night, Tolkolom, just 2 or 3 words I knew. That was about it. So that was Melbourne, and they were married for about 7 years at that point. They decided they would go back to Hungary in 1972, as they hadn't been back there since their escape. So they wanted to see their families again. Mm-hmm. And just before we went, it was quite sad. My mother received a telegram at the front door announcing that her brother had just passed away in a car accident. Oh. And the only time she remembers seeing him was when he was like a 10-year-old child. So that was pretty devastating. And I do remember that as a little 6-year-old girl, the sadness that caused her. So we went back to Hungary, 1972, communist Hungary, And I remember meeting my grandmother, my uncle, and some cousins. Then on our return to Australia, again, there was just complete disconnect with the Hungarian family, in fact, and anything to do with Hungary. And then shortly after that, my parents divorced and my mother remarried an Australian man, and again, even more disconnection with my Hungarian heritage. My dad did go on to marry another Hungarian lady, but there was, being a stepdaughter, there was no sort of connection between us.
Right.
But that was sort of my parents' journey from leaving Hungary to migrating to Australia. And I mean, in all honesty, they became wonderful Australians. They really love Australia, fully embraced the cultures of the Australian way of life.
I feel like a lot of families have similar stories because upon leaving, I feel like I mentioned this phrase in another episode that many people felt that leaving was forever. So
Yes.
it was easier to try to emotionally assimilate to your new surroundings, especially like with children too. So, you could feel their pain, I'm sure, and just
Yes.
knowing their story, which was pretty common. But it was fortunate that as a child, you were able to go back and visit. That must have been pretty
Yes.
exciting.
Yeah, I was only 7, but I do have some strong memories of visiting. Yeah, I do. Quite strong memories, actually. There's one elderly lady I remember meeting, and I do believe now, after all these years, I've actually found out that she was my great-grandmother.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so that's something I've only just learnt recently. So that was wonderful. Yeah.
Ilka's Kitchen, this book is not just recipes. It's a memoir of your life, of your journey. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this. Tell us your
Sure.
inspiration.
Okay. I've always wanted to write a book. I've got an English teaching and library background, and I have just always wanted to be a published author. That was the first thing. The second thing was I have always loved cooking Hungarian food, and cooking in general. And a couple of years ago, at the beginning of COVID, my daughter asked me to write down all my recipes, not just Hungarian food, but everything. So I did a really,
That's a tall order.
oh, yes, it was actually. Yeah, so I ended up doing like a photo recipe book, a very, very amateur book
Right.
with just processing recipes and making a photo recipe book. So I just did that with some online software.
Right.
And that planted the seed. And then about a year later, I actually met someone a lady who wrote her first book, and I said, "Oh, how did you do that?" And she said, "Oh, I had an editor help me." So I reached out to this editor and sat down with her and said, "Look, this is my idea." Actually, originally I was going to write about intergenerational trauma,
Ooh.
which is much more heavy. And I thought I was going to tell a really sad story. And then she said, "No, why don't you write about your cooking and include, yes, some family history in there, but make it a joyous book." So the book just blossomed into this, morphed into this, what it is. And I'm actually very proud of it. So there's the family history there, but I just touch on it. I don't go too deeply into it. Then I started thinking about all my Hungarian recipes that I knew. And honestly, Christine, no one has actually ever taught me how to cook Hungarian food. My mum has actually never taught me. We may talk about that later, but so the layout of the book and everything came so easily to me. It was, right, I'm going to talk about a brief history of my family life, my Hungarian heritage. And then I looked at all the recipes that I knew were strong, that I could write well or rewrite well. When I look at what I gave my daughter the first time, oh my gosh, I've written them obviously now very professionally. My editor actually said, "Oh, we really should get these recipes edited or checked even further by a cookbook writer." So again, some money went out the door, and I hired someone just to quickly check over the recipes and make sure everything was standardized and as professional as it could be. As you know, with recipes, it's always up to interpretation by the individual.
Sure.
But I wanted to get them out as simply as possible. I'm not a chef, and I wanted it to be as easy to follow as possible. And then through the recipe writing, I discovered, I've got lots of stories to tell about lots of these recipes.
Wow.
So I just blended all of that into it as well. And my travels through Hungary linked into some of the recipes. And I just found it just turned into this nice little project. And a lot of people are seeming to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept to have the stories along with the recipes, because I feel what I struggle with, thank goodness for the internet now that, we have all these outlets to look at and books, but recipe books that don't have pictures. I'm a visual person and I like to see, well, what is it going to look like? So your book does that. It gives the recipes, gorgeous pictures, and the stories that go along with it. It's such a great combination. And what you said, you're not a chef, but you are a chef. You're a chef for your family. Like, we're all chefs, just different levels of, being a chef. And it is funny that you said that your mother never really wrote anything down. That's so typical, right? It's so typical. And I think back, I don't have anything written down either from my grandmother. Of course, we have some, Hungarian cookbooks and things like that, but everybody's interpretation of a recipe, like how your mom made it or your grandma made it, it's individual to that household. So I'm still perfecting recipes by looking on the internet. I'm like, well, it didn't look like that. It looks like that.
I find the internet quite overwhelming to look for recipes sometimes. You just get caught up in different versions of the same thing.
I agree. So before we dive a little deeper into the book, tell us about your cover art, because I feel like it's a great combination of your Hungarian and your Australian heritage matched together. Tell us about that.
Well, after I wrote the book and the editor and I decided, this looks like this could be quite a good book. We should probably look at getting a book designer on board. And so she found a lady who, lo and behold, has Hungarian heritage. So that was amazing that I met up with this amazing book designer called Anna, and she's a local book designer, and she and I just sat down together and we thought about what images we wanted. And I definitely wanted folk art images, which is what the tulips are. They're very just traditional folk art. And the flowers in the middle, but underneath the tulips, are what's called kangaroo paws. And they are and I just had a brainstorm about that. I was out last year and we were still deciding on the final front cover layout. And I just knew there had to be something Australian on there. It was spring and I saw some kangaroo paws in the neighbourhood and I went, oh my God, that's the flower we need to put into the book. Okay. So, and kangaroo paws are unique to Western Australia. They are found everywhere in Australia now, but they originally come from the state I live in now. So that was even more special. And then, of course, I had to have a food symbol on the front. So there's 2 paprika peppers that she's crossed over it. So it almost looks like that's my family shield.
It is your family shield now.
I think
At least the crest of your kitchen now.
Yes, definitely. And then she's incorporated. So the cover has, the typical Hungarian colours, the green, the red and the white background. But she also threw in splashes of like a magenta, a hot pink. Mm-hmm. And that's also on the inside cover. And on the spine of the book is the magenta pink. And I said, why did you choose that colour? And she said she felt that it represented me, that I'm a very colourful, bright person. And I thought, okay, I'll go with that. I didn't want to change what she chose. I thought that was a great idea. So that's sort of, and the font, oh my gosh, trying to choose the font for Ilka's Kitchen, how difficult that was. Because it always bugs me that Ilka always looks like two L's. But in the end, I wanted the simplest, cleanest look for the book because the cover art and the inside cover is so out there. Right. I sort of went along with the book designers. Well, I chose it, but she said, let's keep the font as clean and simple as possible. So I learned a lot in the book design phase of making Ilka's Kitchen. It was really interesting.
There's a lot more that goes into it than people even imagine.
Oh, yes.
So
Absolutely.
If anybody out there is thinking about writing a book, there's a lot of steps involved, and keep listening because I think that you're going to find out even more. It's a great example for everyone. I know we spoke about this already a little bit, but let's kind of dive into the book. And in the forward section of your book, you said something pretty powerful. You said, my parents let go of their ancestry when they fled communist Hungary in 1956. And the wording of letting go of your ancestry it's pretty powerful. So I know we spoke about it a little bit, but let's talk about it a little bit more, because I don't think people realize, especially nowadays, because people really hold on to their heritages a lot more when they move around. It wasn't the case. So the letting go, you spoke a little bit about it, how there wasn't a lot of language spoken in the households. Tell us a little bit why you chose to communicate those words in the forward.
Yes, the phrase letting go took me a long time to come up with. I had many other terms that I was going to use, but they were all very negative. And very sad. So I felt in the end I just wanted it to reflect that's how they felt. They just completely let go. They took on a new life and didn't look back, didn't think about their heritage, their families. I was going to try to think of some of the negative words I had before, but I can't now because I just want it to be a more
positive,
softer,
powerful. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree. And I feel like they let go because it was too hurtful to remember too many things. And
very much so.
In a way, I think a lot of people threw themselves into their cooking, and that's how they stayed connected, because food is really at the root of all heritages.
That's right. And I have a quote in the beginning of my book. I don't know if you've noticed that one.
Tell us.
Yeah, so I read a book recently for my book club, actually, and it was it really resonated with me, and it's just at the bottom of my foreword. Food is at the heart of a culture. You don't know your ancestors' cuisine, you don't know who you are. And that's by Elif Shafak, The Island of Missing Trees. So she's a Turkish writer. So I had to put that in the book. It was just...
Yeah, that's pretty moving.
Yeah, and that resonates with me. But in my parents' case, they didn't use anything to keep connected to their heritage. But somehow I have managed to do that. So as soon as I became an adult, I started cooking Hungarian food. And I don't know how I knew how to. The internet wasn't around back then, and I must have just looked at recipe books here and there and then just developed some instinct, or I tell everyone it's in my DNA, and that's why I cook Hungarian food really well. But
I'm going to go with that because that sounds great. I didn't start cooking Hungarian food also until recently. And when I say recently, like past 5, 6, 7 years, maybe, because prior to that, my grandmother would cook. But then as she got older, they're not remembering the recipes as well.
That's right.
And I remember, like a few times it didn't, like, not that it was supposed to taste spicy, but like there might have been like something missing,
Yes,
and it was hard for her to roll out the dough. So, she was going more towards like the bagged noodles for things. And so I didn't really cook too much either until I became an adult. And you're right, the internet didn't really have a lot back then anyway. But now with your book, there's a lot to look through there. You know what it is? It's a great starting point for someone that's never cooked. And it's also a good supplement for someone who's cooked Hungarian food their whole lives, because everybody has different twists to things in a recipe.
That's right.
My pagacha might be different than your pagacha, and or just maybe you add a specific ingredient, or I forgot that my grandmother used to use that ingredient, and it's in your book. So it's really for all stages of people wanting to cook.
You make a really good point there, Christine. Definitely.
Yeah, it's for everybody. It's not just for the beginner. So you talk about your mom in your brief history section before the recipes start. And I liked this. I resonated with this. Her cooking skills may also have come from some sensory memories from her childhood. When you refer to your mother, you say that. And sensory memories, just like the quote you just said before, that's a big part in the foods that we eat. Just, cooking smells. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, did your mom, when you were at her side when she was cooking, do you feel like she had like trials and errors, like when she was cooking to try and get it right? I know I do.
Yeah. Honestly, Christine, the only childhood memories I have of my mum cooking, let alone Hungarian food, was when I was under 6 years of age. And I remember standing next to her grinding walnuts in a funny, like bright orange
Yeah.
grinder.
Mm-hmm.
She must have been making bagely, but I don't know how. Just knowing who she is today, I just can't imagine her ever having made that. But she must have made that. What else did she make? Chicken schnitzel was one thing that she was very good at. I really don't recall much else of her cooking. That's the weird thing. But I've now recently learnt that her father gave her or sent her a beautiful old brown Hungarian cookbook. And I now know a bit more of the story behind that. And that was sent to her after she fled Hungary as a 15-year-old, living with her aunt and uncle in the Netherlands. And it would have been, so she left in 56. She would have received this book between 56 and 58, maybe. And it was a Hungarian cookbook, very typical communist style cookbook that her father mailed to her. And he passed away in 1958. So all I can think of is that she used to use, that was her only reference point to cooking Hungarian food, other than the sensory smells of her childhood, which were only up to the age of 15. And then as an adult woman in Australia, having a Hungarian cookbook in Hungarian would have been her only reference point to cooking Hungarian food.
Wow. I think we take for granted, the access to information that we have today. And,
That's right.
yeah, wow. It's so moving that, to leave your country and not have that access anymore. So you can't imagine what people go through.
Yes. And I just find it amazing that I have picked up what she couldn't do or wouldn't do.
Right.
As far as the cooking goes, it's just, I'm going to say it again, it's in my DNA. I just do believe that because I cook for our Hungarian community now. I started doing that last year. And that was really nerve-wracking because I was putting myself out there. And and I thought, I'm going to be serving this dish. The local Hungarians going to be, there's lots of elderly Hungarians in the community still.
Yeah.
And I have had one person say, this is not authentic Hungarian food. Everything, and I often get people say, you've cooked this just like how my grandmother used to cook it.
Oh, so what a compliment.
I don't know how I know how to cook, but it's...
That's high praise coming from, the elderly people in the group because they know they've been around so long. They've tasted it all, I'm sure. So that's high praise. It is in your DNA. It's meant to be. Let's talk about your book. It's organized so nicely. In the beginning, because it is a memoir, tell us about all the parts because you've got the history and you've got all the sections. So, give the listeners a little idea of what they're going to come across when they purchase your book.
Sure. So, as we said before, it starts with my Hungarian heritage, a brief history. And we've pretty much touched on all of that now. Then I thought it was important to mention, so chapter 1 is my pantry, my paprika passion and kitchen things. So I thought it was important to just lay out the sort of ingredients that I use in my Hungarian cooking. And obviously one of the main ingredients is paprika. And good to know ingredients. I have measurements, but as far as measurements go, that's a hard one because I'm in Australia.
Right.
I refer to Australian measurements, and I do state that in the beginning of the book. But again, with the internet, you can quickly check conversions. But I thought because I'm an Australian Hungarian, I want to just do it how I do it in Australia. But that can easily be interpreted and modified to everyone's particular needs. Then I begin with the chapters of soups, sides, salads and breads, pasta, main courses, desserts, slices and pastries, party drinks, and Hungarian dinner party menus. So I added the last two things in because, my gosh, I have to talk about palinka. You can't have a Hungarian cookbook without talking about palinka. Include my palinka journey in the book, and also Tokai wines. I visited Tokai in 2019 with my husband and some friends, and that was an incredible experience visiting the wineries of Tokai. And I wanted to share with people a bit of my knowledge that I picked up over there with the Tokai wines and how famous they are and how amazing those wines are. And dinner parties, Hungarian dinner party menus. I've always cooked Hungarian dinner parties, pretty well known for that type of cooking. And of course, Christmas time and family time, there's a lot of Hungarian cooking that goes on. And I often do a sort of a set menu, even for my family dinners with my kids and their partners and my husband. And then in the afterword, I actually include a short, it's a reflection, but it's also sort of a bit of a short story about my impressions of my last day in Budapest on one of my trips there.
I love it because it really is jam-packed with food things, but also the stories. So let's just go back to your pantry. I like that you included that because there's a lot of information there for someone that's really first starting out. If they want to put some things in their pantry, it really just gives them an idea. And I know you've listed some markets for the people that live in Australia. Obviously, that would be too far for anybody that lives in the US, but we can provide some additional information in the show notes for people, for things around the US. But you're really helping people take it to the next level to not have to worry about, all right, well, where do I get this? What do I need? Like looking at each recipe and writing it down. The pantry section, I found that super helpful. I have things, but it's nice to know other things that I can, pick up just to have handy. For the new chef, that would be a great thing. I love, obviously you have all like the different, like you said, sections of food, which is amazing, but I don't want to jump to the end. We can jump to the end and then come back. But the fact that you talk about the Tokai wine and the Palinka and you give dinner party recipe, like menu suggestions, like that's really cool. And I think, isn't it broken down in seasons?
Yes, summer menu, winter menu.
That's right. Yeah, which is
Hungarian food is just winter food, but it's not.
It's not. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, I mean, I feel like it just gives that extra flair to it that people can enjoy as they're flipping through the book. Let's talk about some of the stories that you've included in your book.
Sure.
Now, I don't want you to, give away all of the information or spill the beans. How did you choose the stories that you included? Because a lot of them are connected to the recipes. So tell us how you went about that.
Yeah, I did mainly choose the stories that I could link to a particular recipe. So that was definitely what I wanted to do. I wanted to link storytelling with the recipe that I was writing about, to also engage the reader in wanting to really cook the dish and be inspired. And I think I'm also a bit of a travel agent. I want people to go to Hungary and experience the food and culture.
Yeah.
And through my book, they can get a bit of a taste of that by my anecdotal stories about my travels. And I even had a friend the couple that we travelled with to Tokai, my friend Graham wrote a very long Facebook post about one of our days in the Tokai wine region, our wine tour. And I asked him if he would kind of let me put that into the book. So you've probably seen that, Christine, where he talks about So that's his work, not mine, but it just added the whole storytelling of our wine tasting tour in Tokai. There is one recipe, if you wanted me to read it out.
Yes, I was going to ask you if you would be willing to share, one of your stories to get everybody excited about what they're going to find in your book.
Sure. I'll just do a short one because I was going to do the Tokai one, but I think that's a bit too long.
Okay.
But the Lecho one, I'm quite proud of that one. So also with the storytelling, I try to describe the dish and then add a bit of information about where I have tasted it before.
Right.
So the Lecho recipe is this one. So Lecho, which I've then named as a vegetable stew. That's the only way I can really describe it. And this is how it goes. Lecho reminds me of the colours of the Hungarian flag, red, white and green. Red and green paprika peppers, ripe red tomatoes and lots of onions are the main ingredients. It is similar to ratatouille, but has one main ingredient you won't find in ratatouille, paprika. It is the paprika that gives Lecho its uniqueness. High-quality Hungarian paprika powder is best for this dish. Gently fried, the smell of 1,000 paprika peppers fills your nostrils with its freshly ground goodness. As you mix it with the onions, the paprika will tell you by a subtle change in scent when it is time to add the peppers and remaining ingredients. Once ready, lecho resembles an artwork with swirls and splashes of bright colours and your white porcelain bowl as its canvas. I sometimes like to add kolbas, Hungarian sausage, or you can even crack an egg or two and scramble them into the lecho for a more substantial meal. For me, it is simple comfort food that can be eaten day or night. On a visit to Hungary in October 2016, my husband Giles and I stayed in an apartment above a cafe-style restaurant near the Jewish Quarter in Budapest. Most mornings we would dine in, and lecho was my favourite item on the menu, served steaming hot with fresh crusty bread and a cafe latte. Every time I visit Hungary, I love to eat lecho in a local cafe or restaurant.
Such a lovely story. I'm hungry now because the description was beautiful. Like, I feel like you could tell your English background there with all those descriptive words. I love it.
Thank you. That just came to me, but that is exactly what lecho is.
It is. And the great thing, for those who don't know, it's like the simplicity of the meal, but yet it's so dynamic.
That's right.
Of a flavor. So it's hard to believe that so few things can make something so delicious at the same time and fast. So the collection of your recipes, it's an extremely well-rounded collection too. And, I mentioned before that it really is a beautiful book because of the memoir. But regardless if you are just starting out, to cook Hungarian food, or if you've cooked it before, you're giving a lot of the basics for people to get started with, which I think is important. Like the key Hungarian dishes that people think of when they say they want to cook Hungarian food. Now, you're in your second run of the book. Your first run has sold out. So congratulations are in order there. Your second run has just begun. Is that correct?
Yes. So I printed not a huge amount. Being a self-published author, I'm still the sole distributor for the book.
Right.
So the book has cost a huge amount of money for me to make. And as I said, that evolved quite quickly, that we needed to turn it into something pretty special, my husband and I. So the second print run was mainly done because I knew that I had a few events coming up where I thought I'd be able to sell Ilka's Kitchen. Also, the Embassy of Hungary in Canberra, Australia, so the Australian Embassy for Hungary, have purchased numerous copies.
That's
so
fantastic.
I feel very, very honoured that they feel my book is of value to the Hungarian diaspora. I'm hoping they will spread it far and wide within the Australian community and beyond. So I just have now this second print run, and I still have books. But my only way to sell them is really through my social media, which has been a godsend. I have a Facebook page where I've been able to sell my books mostly that way. I'd say a third of them would have gone to the US and Canada on the first print run. So I had a lot of people buy the book directly from me.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the shipping, they were happy to pay the shipping fee. Fortunately for you guys, your dollar is a lot stronger than the Australian dollar, and I'm only charging what I charge in Australian dollars for the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually does, when you see how much it costs, it's actually going to cost Americans a lot less than Aussies.
Right. Right. Okay. So that's really exciting. I didn't realize that it had already spread out into, the US and Canada. That's pretty great. That's amazing.
Yeah. The first print run, my husband and I are trying to work out how many books have actually gone. I should have counted up all my receipts, but probably, we think at least a quarter of the first run went overseas. Definitely.
Congratulations. That's exciting, That's really, just to branch out over the world. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's obviously, hit a note with people, and perhaps the social media, what I put out there.
Absolutely.
People thinking as well.
Congratulations. So what I wanted to say is that it's an important book for the Hungarian community, especially the diaspora outside of Hungary, because these are the things that keep us connected to our Hungarian heritage.
Right.
People like yourself who, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to publish, and you're spreading a little bit more of your Hungarian heritage where you are and now overseas with your cookbook. Like, that's so important that the Hungarian heritage stays alive, that it stays strong, and it's through efforts like yourself and your book that helps make that happen. Because we have to maintain it. We can't just let it dissipate as like the older generations, pass. We have to reignite it, and I feel like your book is doing that. And
Yeah, I
it's
feel
really an
very,
important piece.
thank you. I feel very strongly about that being an ambassador or the book being an ambassador for the
Absolutely.
Hungarian diaspora. And it has actually touched a lot of people. I had no idea it was going to be as successful as it has been. It's just, and even non-Hungarians are loving
Yeah.
it. Not just friends and family, but I've had people that have no connection to the Hungary at all, and they have
Yeah.
said,
You'd be surprised, and I'm not here to talk about myself at all, but even like with this podcast, I've gotten so much positive feedback,
yes,
even from non-Hungarians that,
yes,
oh, I can't wait until like the next episode. And, that really makes me feel good because at least we're spreading the word about our culture and,
absolutely.
what's amazing about it and like the foods they can eat and the places they can visit. I feel like your book is doing that. And like, that's like part of your journey now, just like this podcast and the things that are coming with this podcast
Yes,
are part of my journey. And it's all the little pieces that we put together in this diaspora really keep our heritage strong. And,
that's right.
we need to be there for each other and support each other and lift each other
Absolutely.
up because I think that's just how we stay connected,
That's right. Yeah, Christine, I think you're doing an amazing job with your
Oh,
podcasts.
thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
So
I
interesting.
appreciate
Yeah, I'm
that.
learning a lot from them as well.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm learning a lot as I go as well, because if anyone's been listening since the beginning, this has been a recent endeavor with a similar inspiration as
Yeah,
yourself, where it's just like, it just happened, with like a
yes.
family event. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
right. Before we talk about all the logistics of how people can order and all of your social medias, there's two things that you said in the afterword that I want to read out loud to the listeners. Because you do discuss your trip that you took. The trip when you went to Hungary, it says, the trip to Hungary was life changing for me. And then you said the trip in 2013 was the beginning of a journey of self discovery.
Oh,
So
yes.
those are strong sentences that you said there
Yes,
because
yes.
you visited as a child and then you also visited as an adult. And I
Mm.
really, really connected with what you were saying throughout the whole book. It was a huge
Yes,
connection for me. I feel like we were meant to be friends.
definitely, Christine.
But yeah, I feel like that was a huge connection for you. Puzzle pieces fall into place for you. Am I right?
Yes, definitely. Oh, absolutely. That was a pivotal moment in my life. But from that moment on, the moment I stepped on Hungarian soil, it was no turning back. I became a
Yeah.
Hungarian
I feel
citizen,
the
and
same. I feel like we have this
yeah,
little club that we're starting now, this
I
community of
think so. I think we have to.
yeah.
We're the second generation Hungarians, and we're going to
Yeah. I
be
love it.
stuff.
We need to make t-shirts for ourselves so we can
I think so.
have a club. Okay, so
Definitely.
one exciting thing is that what you already know is that we're going to be giving away, well, I'm going to be giving away one of your books. So, and I will discuss that on social media, which you'll see after this podcast airs. But I'm also going to give away another book to someone in Australia. So I'm going to give away two. I want to be able to spread your book around and spread around all the lovely stories and recipes that you have. So if people want to purchase the book, tell us how they can do that. And then after that, tell us how they can connect with you on social media, because I will
Sure.
include all of that in the show notes so nobody has to rush and write these things down quickly. So tell us how to do
Right.
that.
Yes, as I mentioned previously, through my Facebook page is the main way to purchase my book. So it's just Ilka's Kitchen, and people direct message me, and that's how they can place their order. Instagram, I haven't really set that up properly yet for people to purchase that way, but through Messenger on Ilka's Kitchen is the
Right.
best way.
Okay. I can confirm that the books come pretty quickly from across the
Yeah,
globe.
actually, I've noticed that. They head
Yeah.
to the US quicker than sometimes to the east coast of Australia, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It'll be at your doorstep pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the postage is quite straightforward. It
Yeah.
gets to
Well,
Yeah.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, telling us all about your book and your stories. And I feel like this is an amazing book. I'm excited to share it with people. And I think that you should run to Facebook and order one from Ilka because you will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for being here today, Ilka. This was a great day for me. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Christine, for having me. I'm so happy to have been able to share my book with you. And I love your podcast. I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. We're in this together. We're going to grow the community. Thanks for joining me today on this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. Don't forget to check the show notes for information about this episode and how you can connect with Ilka on her social media platforms, and for information on how you can purchase her cookbook memoir, Ilka's Kitchen. And don't forget to check my social media and Ilka's social media for information about how you can enter to win a free copy of Ilka's Kitchen. We will be giving away 2 copies, so be sure to check both of our social medias for contest rules and entry dates. Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you've enjoyed the episode and you're interested in learning more, be sure to sign up for the email list on my website, www.myhungarianheritage.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Hungarian Heritage Podcast. If you have any feedback about today's episode or you'd like to reach me at the podcast, please feel free to send me an email at Christine@myhungarianheritage.com. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, you will find all the ways to connect with the podcast in the show notes below. A big thanks to my audio editor, Tori Irvin, for working her audio magic on this episode and every episode of this podcast. Our theme music is Hungarian Dance by Pony Music, used with special license from Envato Market. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts so we can continue to connect our modern lives with our Hungarian heritage and grow this Hungarian heritage community. Until next time, goodbye everyone. Sziasztok mindenkinek!